Welcome to a new episode in our series, The Enigma of Astrology. Today, with a very, very special guest. I have been in contact with Professor Dr. Becca Tarnas for quite a number of years since I got her PDF of her PhD dissertation. Today, we do a talk. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure to be here.
And we start with the copyright as always. And let's get rid of this part. Technique. Gee, this is bad. Okay. The copyright is like this. Copyright. I have only the right to publish the conversation uncut and unedited on freely accessible video platforms. That means no paywalls, and on my homepages, our guest, Professor Tarnas, has the right to shorten, edit, or add as she wishes, and to publish it on her websites and video platforms, on her Facebook account, and whatever to her liking. Is that okay?
That is okay. Thank you for doing that.
And we start with a presentation, which is this one. And if you click on this link, you find this presentation. It's a 2-hour presentation about the participatory imagination. And what I want to do today is to continue this session with Professor Tarnas when she was talking to the internet group of C.I.IS. Jung's depth psychology. And I will start with passages of her PhD dissertation on page 126. That is chapter 3, the imaginal realm. And in the presentation, you talked about the problem of container if one wants to do active imagination. We will come to the problem of psychedelic sessions with Stan Grof later on and LSD research, where you need people to watch over you when you do this special experience. And you said in the presentation for the Maryland group also that it's best not to do active imagination or participatory imagination without a guide, somebody watching over you. Could you elaborate on that?
Absolutely. And when I say that, I'm really saying it from a place of wanting to protect the well-being of people who might be new to working with practices like this. It's not an overall statement, a kind of blanket statement in terms of, this is a hard and fast rule. I think there are plenty of people who engage with practices like active imagination independently, myself included. So what I meant by that is, as Jung himself described, active imagination can be deeply catalyzing of the psyche. It brings forward images, encounters, experiences with the depths of the unconscious. And that, for some people, can be quite overwhelming, especially if it's something that they haven't engaged with a lot, or if there's a lot of unconscious material that's just waiting to bubble forth. So Jung would say that the practice of active imagination isn't without danger. It can carry the patient too far away from reality. It's a paraphrase of one of his quotes about active imagination. And so the way that I've introduced active imagination to my students, to workshop participants, is in a group setting where we will start off by coming together, usually, sitting in a circle or maybe lying down on the ground, and I will guide them with a very open-ended, almost like a guided meditation, but with images. But I'm not planting the images. I'm not saying, oh, you're going to see this specific thing, which some guided meditations do. Rather, I'm just leaving it open-ended, this questioning of, well, what are you experiencing? Do you hear something? Do you see something? What are you perceiving? Just leaving it open to what may emerge. And I've always been amazed every time I do this in a class, in a workshop, how it works every time. There's the skeptical side of me that thinks, oh, there's someone it's not going to work for. They're going to have a totally kind of mental experience and nothing's going to happen. And the vast majority of the time, every person in these contexts has some kind of an experience. And so, what I invite them to do is allow this experience to unfold and then move it gradually out from their personal experience into the larger group container. So they can first shift into drawing what's come up, which will often continue the experience. This was something Jung emphasized. And then they can also write about it, which is a little bit more objective, concretizing the experience. And then I bring them together in small groups to share with each other, and then finally bring it into the larger group context. And I think what that does is it provides people with a container, as you said, where they can get reflection on, oh, other people had experiences like I did, or this is normal. This is a healthy expression of the psyche, that images will arise or auditory experiences will arise, emotions will take on personified forms, and so forth. And I think that can be very valuable in terms of bringing us back to a kind of consensus reality, a relational reality with each other, and say, oh, yes, I had this experience, so did you. We have this shared common ground, which pulls us back in the way that Jung is saying, so that we're not too far away from reality. Now, that being said, I think that if one is more kind of practiced or experienced with working with a practice like this, then absolutely it's something you could engage with on your own. But I think that there's still a value in bringing the material to, maybe it's your therapist, maybe it's a close friend or circle of friends or a partner who understands this kind of work, where you can gain reflection. They can mirror back to you what you're experiencing.
In the case of C.G. Jung, we have a special situation that he was convinced that he needed somebody at his side. And the person at his side is a person who was sort of written out of history since 1955. And the Jungian communities don't even know the name sometimes. And there's a recent biography, which is in this book. It's called Tony Wolff and C.G. Jung. And younger researchers find the importance of Tony Wolff in the experience of C.G. Jung when he had this special experience since 1913. And you are the editor of this issue number 7 of the Archai journal. We will talk about the Archai generally later on in this talk. And there you have an essay about Tony Wolff and the chart of Tony Wolff and C.G. Jung. Could you tell our viewers what you know about Tony Wolff?
Certainly, and especially in this context around active imagination. So, as you said, she had largely been written out of the history of Jungian psychology after her death. And the place that this is most apparent is in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, the edited memoir of Jung that was edited by Aniela Jaffe. And um, there's no mention in it whatsoever of Tony Wolff, and yet she's such a significant figure in Jung's life. And so she actually started off initially as a patient of Jung's, and then they recognized that, or he especially recognized that there was more here than was appropriate for a client or a patient therapist relationship. And so he cut off all contact for about a year. And it was somewhere right near the beginning of what I would call his Red Book period, when uh, the the images, the fantasies, the immersive visions that started to overtake him, that he recorded in the Red Book, that began in October of 1913, was right around the beginning of that he recognized her significance in his life, and he reached back out to her. No longer that patient therapist relationship, but something different. And there's been a lot of speculation by biographers and scholars of Jung's extramarital relationships. And
It was a ménage à trois. And
mhm,
Emma Reichenbach was the wife of C.G. Jung with children, and that was the maternal side of Jung. And Tony Wolff was the Hetaira. I believe I pronounced that correct. Do you know about the theoretical approach with which C.G. Jung defended himself that this was okay. He had a theoretical approach in discussions with Toni Wolff, why she could not be his wife and why he would not divorce Emma and why she had to remain his muse and his spiritual companion and will never be his official wife. Do you know about these things?
I do. I don't know if I could sum it up exactly, maybe as he would say, in part because maybe I already have some disagreement with him on his argument. But Toni Wolff wrote an essay that lays out what she calls the structural forms of the feminine psyche. And you named two of these polarities already, the mother and the hetera. And then there's two others, the Amazon or the independent woman and the medial woman, who's kind of a medium. And Jung really drew on these polarities to make this argument, as you're saying. So she was described as his spiritual wife. They had what was at the time called a left-handed marriage. So there was a commitment there, but it wasn't the same as the marriage that he had with Emma. And he held the belief that if one were to leave their wife to be with the hetera, with the muse, that essentially it would kind of collapse the creative tension that was present in the relationship as it was if it didn't shift into that more maternal and also matrimonial form. Now, and there's something to what he's saying there for sure. And at the same time, this theory really gives precedence to the man's creativity, that she's his muse, as opposed to, well, what about her creativity? What about her efflorescence as an individual, as an autonomous person? And I think we can see that reflected in her output, her creative output. Toni Wolff was brilliant. She was so sharp intellectually. She should have been given an education that she was denied. She should have had a PhD. It was always an area of shame for her that she didn't. She absolutely would have been capable of that. And so a lot of her research and ideas, and possibly even writings, the book that you picked up by Nan Savage Healy, which is a beautiful biography of the two of them. I couldn't recommend it more highly. I think it was based on about 20 years of research. The author published it not long before her death, actually. This was really her great scholarly gift to the world and to Toni Wolff's memory. And she she lays out how we can actually see some evidence of Toni Wolff's style of writing embedded in Jung's writing. For example, the list of definitions that is at the back of psychological types, which it seems pretty clear they collaborated on together. That list of definitions is in her style, which was much more of a rigorous thinking type. Nan Savage Healy argues that she actually thinks Jung is an intuitive type, not a thinking type, like he would say, and that Toni Wolff was the thinking type. But she gave all that creativity over to the collaboration with Jung. And it was so fruitful, but he really got to take all the credit for it. And that's where the dynamics between them are something that I find quite heartbreaking. Healy lays out that she feels that Toni Wolff in some ways carries the shadow of Jungian psychology because her very existence, her role in the work, let alone in Jung's life, was largely erased. And so I really like bringing her story back in when I teach about Jung's work, not in any way to discredit Jung or to demonize him, more to humanize him.
Well,
Relationships are complex.
if you go back to Sabrina Spielrein and all the other women which are in the picture as well, he was a patriarchal man of his time, and the women married to people like that were of Victorian style. Emma Reichenbach didn't divorce him. She went along with this ménage à trois, and her heart was broken as well. So how do you see the karmic relations? Did you ever think about why this happened? Was it necessary? I have the impression that the Red Book wouldn't exist without Tony Wolff.
I think that that's true. I don't think the Red Book would exist without her. And this kind of loops us back to the conversation that we started with about the container for active imagination. For Jung, his experiences that he recorded in the Red Book were so intense and so overwhelming during that period of years. He needed someone that could understand what he was going through. And Tony Wolff was that person. I like to compare her to Ariadne from the myth of Ariadne and Theseus, where she really provided that thread back out through the labyrinth and would guide him back to consensus reality. And they would meet almost every day to discuss the experiences he was having. And so I think you're absolutely right that the Red Book wouldn't exist, certainly not in the form that it's in, probably not in such a fruitful way that he was able to transform it into a psychology that we're still actively using today. So she offered that. She offered that container, and it was a great sacrifice on her part and on Emma's part, for both of them. And here's one thing that I will commend all of them with is that uh, they were all, even though they struggled with the situation, they were all aware of it. There was an above board ethics between them.
Well, Tony Wolff was in the family on Sunday, on the Sunday dinner. Years
Yes.
and years and years. It lasted till the 1920s. Then and then in the 1950s, she was cut off of the dinner with the family. Um, when you talk about those workshops with your students, doing the active imagination, did you ever experience people of the depth like C.G. Jung was able to do active imagination?
Not in that setting, and that's intentional. You don't want to catalyze something that intense in a weekend workshop or in a class. It's not responsible as a teacher or as a guide. But I have met students who are capable of that kind of depth, or who have had experiences that are at the level that Jung is describing. And so we, try not to activate them in that way in that particular class container, but those students have often brought their experiences to me to discuss them and will feel very validated knowing that Jung had the experiences that he did, or that there are ways to kind of dip into this realm and then back out of it and so forth. But we try not to go to that level that Jung was at, where it was a crisis at a certain point for him. So we don't want to activate a crisis in class.
And he has a special lineage of clairvoyance in the mother side of his parents. The family is called Preiswerk or something like that.
Mhm.
In my opinion, which must not be valid, I have the feeling that when we talk about the Red Book, we might be obliged to think about whether Jung was clairvoyant in the sense of his mother side's legacy, because the people of his mother side were clairvoyant. What do you think about that?
I think that that's a very legitimate proposal. I wouldn't disagree with you there. That Jung had capacities to enter into the unconscious, or as we'll, I think, discuss, what some have called the imaginal realm, to enter into this inner space. And others, especially in our contemporary society, kind of a disenchanted society, may not have those same capacities. So I think that there is something significant there in terms of Jung's own abilities, his porousness to the unconscious. And we do see that coming through his maternal line. His mother had experiences that were somewhat comparable. We don't know the details, but she was hospitalized at times when he was young. Um, and he would get visions surrounding her as well of unusual things. His grandfather, her mother, Samuel Preiswerk, was supposedly he could commune with the dead. He had second sight, they called it. I think there is definitely something to that. And you know, a lot of people, when the Red Book was published, would ask questions such as, well, was Jung doing something like psychedelics at this time? Because it's hard for certain people to imagine even being able to enter into these states of consciousness without some sort of chemical mediation. And I believe completely that he was not. He's left too much evidence indicating that there wasn't a substance involved and that this really was coming upon him spontaneously to begin with, that it wasn't welcome. And then eventually he was able to work out this method that he came to call active imagination that allowed him to work with what was coming up. Um, so,
And that
yeah.
that brings us to your work on the Red Book, because let me see where I have this. You were doing a PhD dissertation in CIIS. We will talk about your career later. And there was a 2 hour talk with nightlife astrology, and I have a special film list for the viewers. If you want to know about Professor Dr. Becca Tarnas, you have 145 videos more or less, but it's not all about her. But this one, let me see where that is. The first one,
Okay.
astrologers in profile. This is a talk which was done by the YouTuber Adam Ellenbass, and in that talk, you do a lot of work in explaining how you became the doctoral Dr. Phil when doing a work on the red books of J.G. Jung and Tolkien. And I want to go to that PhD. I got this from you, and still very thankful that you sent me this in 2018. I sent you to me, I believe. And in that dissertation, which when will it be published? How far are you?
I'm still working on that. I'm finding the right home for it. And I'll admit the reason that it's been hard to find the right publication home, I've been in contact with three publishers at this point. One is very much in the works. It could be moving forward, but
Yeah,
I don't want to jinx it.
don't jinx it.
Um,
Is Brill of Europe in that consideration?
Publication in Europe, I mean, I certainly hope so.
No, I mean, what you're
Oh,
considering is one of these three publishers, the world famous Brill
oh,
publisher.
Brill. Oh no, it isn't.
Well,
Um,
you should talk to them. They might be interested. Okay,
okay,
I go to chapter 3, and before I do that, I get some more light.
okay.
Because whereas you are in Nevada City, I'm in Hanover, Germany. It's getting darker and darker. So, chapter 3, the imaginal realm. The journey to the imaginal realm follows no straightforward path, and along the way, thoughts and words that once held clear meaning begin to change as reality and fantasy blend to reveal a new domain, an other world of imagination. C.G. Jung's journey into the world, recorded in his Red Book, began first with visionary experience and then deepened with the cultivation of active imagination. I'm still not sure how to understand that. It could be, in your presentation with the Maryland group, you said Tony Wolff was unable to execute active imagination. Do you still have this opinion? Do you know where this comes from? Is there a source for that?
Yes, it was in that book that you shared, Nan Savage-Healy's biography, that she actually asked a client of hers or a patient of hers, could you guide me into active imagination? I haven't been able to do it, which is so
Ah,
surprising for somebody who had such a deep trust in the unconscious that she was able to kind of hold that container, but didn't seem to be able to easily access it herself, Whereas someone like Jung, he's just being flooded with
Yeah,
images all the
yeah,
time, and he can step into the
yeah.
drama and have conversations. And I think that's the case. For certain people, it is more difficult to suspend the critical faculty, as Marie-Louise von Franz calls it, to kind of set aside that mind that's always jutting in. I mean, this is why it is comparable to meditation. It is a practice of kind of setting aside the mind, asking the ego to step aside, and just allowing the unconscious to express itself. Now, we can never fully set ourselves aside, of course, but I think it is harder for certain people than others. Just, in the same way that it's harder for some people to be a great athlete or to have artistic abilities or something like that, that we all have different capabilities. Jung seemed to be someone who had a very special ability, as we were talking about, to enter into these states of consciousness.
And it's not a normal meditation. For example, like a Zen meditation, you try to get empty.
Right.
Whereas in the active imagination, you sort of focus on something. Like, for example, in astrology, you focus on the planet Saturn or some other astrological aspects. I don't really understand how you do that.
Well, the way that I usually start doing that again, with my students is we'll start with an emotion because we all have emotions that are emerging all the time. And so let's say we go into the experience feeling very sad or feeling very angry. Maybe something happened that morning. And I will just ask the participants to stay with that feeling for a while, just to be present. Well, what does that feel like in your body? Let's say it's sadness. Does it feel heavy? Where do you notice it? How is it affecting your breathing? And then invite them. It's always an invitation, never a demand. Invite them to allow an image to come forward. Or maybe for some people it's a voice, a word, but image is usually what tends to emerge for people. Can you see it? Can you actually see that feeling? And more often than not, either a landscape will emerge that kind of reflects that feeling, or a kind of personification of that. And it takes on a form where it kind of separates from us a little bit, still interior, but we can start to see, okay, this just isn't just me. This is something that I'm in relationship to. And again, just inviting that to emerge. And if it becomes clearer, if it takes on a greater form, then I'll invite participants to enter into a dialogue with it. Whatever they want. Who are you? What are you doing here? And again, more often than not, that form will respond.
Okay, in your dissertation, you then talk about the definition of imaginal
Mhm.
by Henry Corbin, and he differentiates between imaginal and imaginary. Basically, Corbin and Tolkien might be as well, and Lance Owens in his lecture in CIIS, which is on the playlist also. I got the impression that Lance Owens thinks of the imaginal realm as something real, something not in the imaginary in my head, but something which Tolkien could go into.
Mhm.
How about your opinion?
I I agree with that perspective for the most part, but with that talk that you brought in about the participatory imagination, I think it's maybe philosophically slightly more complex than even our language allows us to describe. So let me do my best with this. Um, First of all, that differentiation that Henri Corbin brings in, who I was so glad when I came across his scholarship, because he makes this differentiation between the imaginary and the imaginal.
Yes.
Imaginary is a term that many of us are quite familiar with in terms of, oh, you just imagined it. You made it up, which can be something that, we just think up. It's actually a more cognitive ability, uh, kind of coming up with something randomly. Let's say I'm making up a story to tell my son at bedtime. He That's actually not a great example because more often than not, the imaginal intrudes what in storytelling. But we all know what that's like when we just make something up. Oh, you just kind of come up with an answer to something. That's the imaginary. What Corban means by the imaginal, first of all, he's using it in a religious context. He's talking about the experiences of Sufi mystics, and I would apply this more broadly to mystics in general, that the imaginal is when we have an internal experience that is often visionary, that we nonetheless feel in the depths of our being is real. It's true, that we couldn't just make it up. It emerged beyond our control. Yes.
Now we are in a central point. You use the word real.
Mhm.
What do you mean by that?
So I really had to wrestle with that word when I was working on my dissertation because it kept changing. Because usually we think of, on the one hand, we have the imaginary or fantasy, the unreal, in contrast to the real or truth. That seems to be a very clear binary. And the more I explored what Corban and others have called the imaginal, reality starts to come over this way, but it's maybe in contrast to the literal and the physical. So the physical is probably the easiest. There's material physical reality surrounding us. I'm not talking about that kind of reality. I'm talking about something that has a deep truth to it that we are not simply coming up with through our own individual cognitive minds, but something that is emerging internally, that when we honestly look at it, we think, I didn't, I didn't create that. I didn't come up with that. That came through me. And this is why I love bringing Tolkien in here or other artists or authors who so often speak about their experience in that way. I didn't come up with it. I didn't make it up. It came through me. This deep sense of their art or their literature, that they're just a vessel for it. So that's the thing that I'm trying to describe as real. And so when I'm saying real, I mean, um, again, something that it has a deep truth that we recognize. There's a subjective recognition to it for sure. And I think there's an honesty when we look at it. So we have to be honest with ourselves when we're talking about it. I've had this, yes, please.
Going back to Lance Owens and his lecture in CIIS in California, he mentioned he was asked, did Tolkien believe in elves? And his answer was no, he knew.
Mhm.
And that is something very difficult. Could it be that basically we shouldn't talk about this because we can't know what we are talking about?
I mean, I think we should talk about it because we will always get a little bit better at knowing how to talk about it. Now, of course, Lance Owens is echoing Jung's famous statement when he was asked, do you believe in God? And Jung said, no, I know.
The same thing,
Um,
same thing.
the same thing. And that's coming, even though that it was decades later that he said that famously in an interview, that was coming out of his experiences recorded in the Red Book, particularly the dialogues with the figure Philemon, that were recorded in the Seven Sermons to the Dead, which are part of the Red Book, but they were actually published separately long beforehand. This took place in early 1916. And Philemon, who Jung described, Philemon is arguably the most significant figure who emerged for Jung during his Red Book period. He was kind of a guide to him, or comparable in some ways to a guru. And it was very clear that this was a personality who he could be in dialogue with internally only. He wasn't anywhere in the outside world. He wasn't physical. He wasn't a literal person. But clearly, Philemon knew things that Jung, the individual, did not know. And so he was able to learn from Philemon. He was able to gain wisdom from him in these dialogues. Yes.
Taking Philemon, I think he was the one when Jung was talking about you are a symbol, and he said, no, no, you're wrong. I'm real. And that's the same reel we were talking about beforehand.
Yeah.
And there is a touch of in Meister Eckhart, when he talks about mystic experience, he basically says, I can't talk about what I experience because what I experience is not able to be put into words. And I have the feeling that all the people who try to understand the Red Book write about, well, we have 5 volumes about the Red Book now by Murray Stein and Arzt, and you have published an essay in book 4 about that. And I have the feeling, what are you doing? That's not how to approach this problem because we can't talk about that. We are human beings, and what Philemon is beyond our understanding. Would disagree with that?
I wouldn't disagree with that. I think that what Meister Eckhart and other mystics are saying is true in the sense that as soon as we try to translate these experiences into language, it inevitably doesn't do justice to it. It collapses. Our language is unable to convey that experience fully. That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. I
Okay,
think that
okay,
I think that there's a real gift in trying,
okay.
even the struggle of trying, while humbly admitting that we can never fully convey it. The reason I think we should try, though, is because it invites at least some others to try themselves, to allow themselves to open up to such experiences. And then they too will say, oh, I know what that person meant now,
Okay.
even though they could never put it into language.
Taking your own PhD dissertation text, how effective, though, is the method of active imagination at uncovering the objective reality of the collective unconscious? This is a sentence going right to the heart of the problem, right?
Absolutely.
How is your
Um,
answer? Today, 2026, your dissertation is from 2018. Did you change your approach to what you did in your PhD dissertation? Is something new coming up that you understand it better, or are you still on the same page that, okay, this sentence is valid today as it was then?
I kept running with that question, which was posed by the Jungian analyst Wolfgang Gigerich, and he he's the one who basically says, "Well, does active imagination really give us objective knowledge of the unconscious, or is it just kind of a simulation of that?" And I thought, well, that's a really important question to ask. And so, beyond what I wrote in the dissertation, I did write this additional essay that is in volume 4 of Jung's Red Book
Yeah,
for Our
I
Time.
have it here in the library edition. It's Jung's Red Book for Our Time, Searching for Soul Under Postmodern Condition, edited by Maurice Stein and Thomas Arzt, editors volume 4, and it starts on page 239, I believe. Yes, and it's called The Participatory Imagination, Becca Tarnas. So this book is available on Amazon, so the publication of the PhD dissertation will be sometime. But if people want to understand what you're writing in your dissertation, they can go to that essay.
Yeah.
And I think we might be leaving it at that because I didn't want to go more minutes into your dissertation than we have done now. Now let's start with a little bit easier topics. 2004, you were on the World Astrological Conference in Basel because I've seen you there. Why were you there?
That in some ways could mark the beginning of this career that's unfolded, even though at I was 16 at the time, I had no idea. The reason I was there was that year I was studying abroad in Stuttgart, Germany,
What did you do
and
there?
I went to it was a high school exchange program.
Ah, okay. Because I'm from Stuttgart.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I got to
But,
spend several months there living with a family. It was very
oh,
special.
very nice. Okay. Schwäbisch.
Um,
Okay. Did you pick up?
yes.
Did you speak German?
I did. It's been so long now that I'm rather ashamed that my German has fallen
Oh,
apart. So
okay. Okay.
I wouldn't want to risk it here in dialogue with you. But at the time, back then when I was 16, I was able to go to school. Schwäbisch was a little more difficult than the High German I'd been taught in my Waldorf school in San Francisco. But I went to the Michael Bauer Schule, and was there through the spring, and we had a break at some point. I think it was a 2 week spring vacation, and it happened to line up with when my father, Richard Tarnas, was coming to Europe for this conference in Basel. And he was going to be there. Stan Groff was going to be there. And so he picked me up in Stuttgart and we drove down kind of right along the French-Germany border. And we visited, we went through Alsace-Lorraine, which is where some of my family lineage is from, and down through Switzerland. We visited Geneva, which is where my dad was born, and then ended up in Basel. And so I tagged along to this conference and heard astrologers speak who I'd never heard before, like Michael Luton or Brian Clark, and my interest started to be piqued a little bit.
Did you listen to Hayo Bansav?
If I did, I don't remember,
Oh, okay,
but
okay.
again, I was
Uh,
only
yeah.
16.
And when you were at the bookshop, because the book of your father was there for sale bei Reinhard Stiele Astronova in Kiron Verlag, did you buy any German astrological books?
I didn't.
You
I
didn't.
will admit at the time I didn't really have an interest in astrology. That would come some
2009
six
would
years later.
2009 it would started
Yeah.
with your last semester, and you studied in college in Maine, is that correct?
In Massachusetts,
In
actually. So,
Massachusetts, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, and that was theater and ecology, right?
theater and environmental studies is what they called it.
And
Yeah,
then you heard the lecture of your father, and you realized astrology is something important, and you realized CIIS is important, and then you went to San Francisco, and you had a job there in an interesting company. It's all in the video with Adam Ellenbass, so people can watch that 2 hour video for all this development. And then you got into a master program, and now I want to ask a little bit more because it's not in the video with Adam.
sure.
The master program of CIIS was inside the Department of Psychology, Cosmology, and Consciousness. Is that correct?
Philosophy, cosmology, and
Yeah,
consciousness.
the
Yes.
PCC
Yep.
program.
Yep.
What courses did you take in these two
Oh,
years?
oh gosh. It was such a wonderful master's program to be a part of. And this was the program that my dad founded. He was the
He
founding
created it, yeah,
director.
in 1994, I believe.
In 1994, in collaboration, Robert McDermott was the president of CIS at the time and brought him in. And then Brian Swim, who's a mathematical and scientific cosmologist, was part of the founding. Charlene Spretnak. Within a few years, Sean Kelly, who's still teaching in the program, came in, teaching on everything from transpersonal psychology and Jung to the evolution of consciousness. And their vision in founding the PCC program was they wanted to create a graduate program that they would have liked to have attended when they were in graduate school. So that was the dream. And when I first heard my dad speak and then um, started sitting in on classes in that program, I just not only fell in love with the program and the classes, but the students, the community. I just thought this is the most inspiring community. Yes,
And now I want to have it concrete.
sure.
I I have heard this type of story about the PCC program in many, many videos,
Okay.
146 in my playlist. You can watch a lot of PCC things, a lot of Becca Tarnas in these playlists. But I never got any information. When I went to university after my retirement in 2005 for a doctoral thesis, Astrologie in Recht, which is astrology and law, because I'm a lawyer from profession. And I went to courses in religious science and philosophy and sociology. And this PCC program has a specific curriculum. And in not one video, anybody talked about the curriculum, what you really did.
Sure. What are the actual you know why we don't? Because they change the classes all the time.
Okay,
There's no set curriculum
let's take 2026 today. You are
today.
assistant professor, so you
Mhm.
should know what is inside your courses in PCC because you're
Yep.
teaching part of it. So what is the content of today? If I would start, when did you start this year? Was it in spring for the semester? When do you start?
We start in the fall. So
So in the fall, okay, this fall is in a couple of months. I want to start a master program, 2 years. Are there mandatory courses and are there free courses?
there are only two mandatory courses. So when you
Oh,
come in the fall, you take Introduction to PCC, that's taught by Sean Kelly, and uh, the primary text for that is Coming Home, which he wrote, which is a kind of philosophical history demonstrating the evolution of consciousness and showing the unfolding dialectic through history. He's a Hegelian. And what's beautiful about that class is each class introduces the students to the work of all the professors, both the retired professors, so Rick Tarnas, Brian Swim, Robert McDermott, but also the current professors, Jacob Sherman, Matt Siegel, myself, Jack Bagby, who's our newest hire, who's an expert in Bergson and Aristotle and Spinoza. And so this fall, besides taking that, one would have the option to take a course on Alfred North Whitehead with Matt Siegel. You would have the option to take a course, an introduction to phenomenology with Jack Bagby. This fall, actually, Jake Sherman and Jack Bagby are co-teaching a course on French spiritualism. So that in this fall is very philosophically heavy. Now, what I always think of myself as the lone non-philosopher in the program right now. Not that I don't dabble in philosophy, to be sure, but I think I'm much more oriented toward depth psychology. I happen not to be teaching this fall because I'm having a baby.
oh,
So
okay. So this is mother vacation in Germany. Is that in America too?
I like mother vacation. That's a nicer way of putting it. We call it maternity leave,
Yeah,
which sounds a little more
same
clinical.
th same thing. In Germany, it's rather long. How long do you get maternity leave from your faculty?
Not nearly as long as in Germany. We only get about 6 weeks.
Jesus
Um,
Christ, that's nothing. Okay, okay.
Um, However, because our courses are a full semester long, even though I'll need to come back and work with doctoral students and attend meetings and so forth, I can do that all online. So it's a little bit easier based on my position than if I had to go in, every day after 6 weeks. So there's a
Okay.
little more flexibility there. So, but what I would be teaching, just to properly answer your question, and I'll teach next fall, um, is a course called Psyche and Cosmos 1, which is an introduction to archetypal astrology as developed by Rick Tarnas and transpersonal psychology as developed in the work of Stanislav Grof and how the two um, it kind of arose together and how students can understand those ideas and work with them in their lives. So that's what I would be teaching if I weren't on maternity leave in the fall. In the spring, I'll be co-teaching with Sean Kelly our advanced course on Jungian psychology. So those are the kinds of things that we're offering right now.
I'm missing 3 hour window because
Yeah.
CIIS has a history and it's very heavily 3 hour window history. So it's not taught today anymore?
Robert McDermott was the one who was teaching Sri Aurobindo in our program. He has the book, the Essential Aurobindo. Uh, Aurobindo is being taught in one of our other programs at CIS, the East-West Psychology program.
But not in
Uh,
PCC.
Not in PCC. The
Okay.
professor who's teaching it is Debashish Banerjee.
Okay.
Um, we sometimes will say, well, he's kind of honorary in PCC because there's
Okay.
such overlap with what we do. Those two programs, there's a lot in common. And this is the beautiful thing about PCC's curriculum is that we tell our students you can take up to half of your units in other programs.
Okay. And
And
talking
so
about
students could get Aurobindo. Yeah.
talking about students, CIS incomplete is somewhere around 2,300, 2,500 students, and PCC is somewhere around 85 to 150 students, correct?
That sounds about right. Yeah.
So basically, PCC is a department inside a CIS construct, which is not a big university like 50,000 or 20,000 students. It's still, the whole CIS is still a small unit, and
Mhm.
PCC is a small special unit in a small total unit.
Yep.
And how many students do you have personally, like MA students and PhD students, you personally?
Combined, I think I have around 36 right now who are my advisees.
Okay.
Um, so some of those are master students. I don't know, I couldn't give you the exact
No,
numbers on my doctoral
it's just
students.
just to give it
Yeah,
so that's so we have an impression about your work.
yeah.
Okay, you did this in 2000. You started your MA in 2011, I think,
Yep, yep.
and you ended your 2-year masters in 2013, and then you report in the video with Adam Allenbus, so we don't have to talk about that, how you came to your doctoral thesis and all that, and the video ends in 2018.
Hmm.
And so we continue from there. You have your doctoral thesis, and there is something like Pacifica, and you are involved with Pacifica as well. Could you tell us what sort of institution is Pacifica, and why were you involved there?
I was involved there basically right around the time I was graduating with my PhD. The whole reason I got a PhD was I want to teach at the graduate level. That was the goal. And Pacifica is an amazing school that's located down in Santa Barbara, California, so in Southern California.
How far
They've
away from CIIS is that?
Oh, I'm not. It would be about a from CIS would be what I think a 6 hour drive.
So
Um,
that's typical American because in Germany, 6 hour drives, nobody does this, but you did.
Yeah, this is very California too. I
Yeah.
mean, even on the East Coast where the states are much smaller, they're like, you drove 6 hours? I mean, what?
Yeah,
I would fly.
I remember when I was in Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia, and we went for a swim to Atlantic City, and that was a 6 hour drive just for swimming. And I'm from Germany, and I thought, "Are you nuts?" But I did it, just to have the experience. It was nice. This is typical America, and it might be even West Coast America, that long distances is something you are accustomed to, whereas 6 hours drive is this is half of Germany.
Absolutely. I mean, even now I live in Nevada City, California, which is in the Sierra Nevada foothills. And so we're about 2.5, sometimes 3 hours from the Bay Area. So we're San Francisco and
And that's by
Oakland
car.
and
You
so
don't have a railroad from there to there.
there is a train.
But
And my
it's a 5 to 6 hours drive with the train if you exchange trains and all that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that would take longer. And we'd have to drive to get to the train station. I mean, we're such a car dependent culture,
Okay.
unfortunately. Um, but yeah, so we're used to those bigger distances.
Okay.
With Pacifica, I was teaching online, so I only had to go down once per course.
Ah,
Um,
okay. This
and then
is
I would just
this
fly.
is 2019. This is before COVID. It's already online. Okay.
Yes, they have a program. So I was teaching in the Jungian psychology and archetypal studies program.
Okay.
And overall, just to kind of give you a picture of Pacifica, they are very oriented toward depth psychology. They have a lot of clinical psychology programs, and the big figures who are taught um, at Pacifica are Jung, James Hillman, and Joseph Campbell. They have an amazing myth program as well, but a lot of their programs are clinical psychology, depth psychology, and so forth. So I was teaching in that program starting in the summer of 2018 as an adjunct. And
Adjunct means you get paid for your teaching, but you are not an assistant professor. You only
right.
get paid for what you do. Now, I have an idea about German university, what they pay, which is not very much. How
Mhm.
about Pacifica? Let's take one course right after your PhD graduation. How much money are we talking about?
I
Just
think,
roughly, it's not precise.
yeah, I think it was about 3,500, maybe 4,000 for the course.
You are better
Um,
off than German people, obviously, because people with a Habilitation in Germany get 35 euros per semester for teaching, for keeping up their Venia Legendi. That's
oh my
another story.
goodness.
Well, the system is different. In Germany, to become a professor, you have to be a Habilitierter. It's something you don't have. You have a
Mhm.
PhD, PhD level, and then in Germany, the real work starts above the PhD. It's
Right.
Habilitation and Professor Heil in Osnabrück has a history of astrology about Hadriana Genitur. It's about this size, it's 1,500 pages. But you don't have that in your country. You have to publish essays, and then you get more career.
Yeah.
And Pacifica continues today, still there?
It continues today. I got to teach with them for about 5 years. I loved it. I got to teach on the Red Book. I taught a course on synchronicity and the new paradigm sciences. But mostly it was a course on Jung's Red Book that I taught every year. Uh, and the only reason I stopped teaching there was because I applied for a full-time core faculty position in PCC at CIIS when that opened up.
When
And so,
I was
yeah.
talking with your father about free will in astrology, and he mentioned that there was a lot of competition for this position, and you didn't get the position because he was your father, but because you were better than the other candidates. How do I have to understand this? The CIIS chieftains or the chieftains of the PCC program announce we have a position to fill. Who is the human research boss for this procedure?
For that procedure, so there were three positions that opened up following the retirement of the three faculty, founding faculty. And so I applied the first round, didn't get the position that first time, but was encouraged to apply again for the second round. And it's not totally clear in terms of, there are people within the program who are running the search committee. They're doing a national search. There are people outside of the program who are doing it. So it's a whole collaboration between internal to the program, professors from outside the program, and then also administration. And everyone has to be on board. And I didn't even apply until after my father had retired. Just uh, one, because there wasn't the positions available, but also just to avoid that overlap or that controversy. And again, I applied twice and was able to demonstrate that I was the best person for the position in terms of my background and experience
Yes, yeah,
and
okay.
the what I teach. Yeah.
And it's called assistant professor. Assistant professor in some university has a tenure track, and in some university it doesn't. How is it in your case? Are you on a tenure track in CIS PCC program?
CIS doesn't have a tenure track, but it does have a um, what would you kind of a promotional trajectory. So one comes in typically as an assistant professor, and then I'm actually up for promotion next year. So I'll apply for promotion, and
Promo
that
promotion to what?
promotion to associate professor.
Ah,
Um,
okay. Assistant professor, associate professor, professor. Is that the line?
Exactly. The last one, which typically is just called professor, is technically called full professor. That's the last stage. Within each one, there's 10 steps. And so you go up each year. So I came up in about halfway through assistant professor based on my experience. Um, and so that's why I'm up for promotion sooner than if I'd started right at the beginning. Um, so that's those are the stages, and it takes several years, and as you say, having to continue publishing and doing research and so forth to be able to be approved at those stages.
In one of the videos I have on my special site, I have three videos about the history of CIS, and Robert McDermott talks in 2018 about the financial problems of CIS. How are the financial problems 2026? Are they still there or are they solved?
They from 2018 they got better,
Okay.
and then they got worse again.
Yeah, well, that's
And so
COVID.
there's
Okay, yeah.
well, actually, we did really well through COVID.
Oh, you did.
Um,
Okay, okay.
because everyone was stuck at home and we had online programs.
Okay, very good.
So
Yeah.
um, we actually had, this was when we had a huge influx of students come in from all around the world, which was wonderful, and really changed the face of our program. Now we're in an entirely online program. We used to be just residential. Then we had both starting in 2016, online and residential. Now we really are just online, which is how I can live not in the Bay Area and how lots of my other fellow faculty don't live in the Bay
So you
Area.
have the same structure as the master and PhD program, cosmology and astrology in Lampeter, Trinity and St. David in Wales. That's online too. This is
Okay.
comparable now.
It is comparable. We do have an annual in-person retreat that isn't required, but we encourage everyone to go, and that's
Still
a
in
beautiful.
Esselen?
It's my heart. It's not at Esalen anymore. We had our
Oh,
last
okay.
one at Esalen in 2024 to celebrate the retirement of those
Yeah,
three faculty members.
okay.
We're actually trying a new place this year that's in the Santa Cruz Mountains, 1440 Multiversity, that looks beautiful. I'm only going to be able to go for 2 nights because of being, I'll have a 2-month-old at that point, plus my 2-year-old toddler. Um, but yeah, so we've been in different locations since Esalen, but
Did they kick you out in Esselen?
they didn't kick us out. They just asked for more money than we have.
Okay,
So
that's
we,
that's a valid reason.
yep.
Okay, now you are assistant professor and it's online, so you can stay in Nevada City. Now we come to the question. On my special site, I have two videos about Nevada City. Who was the impulse? Where did you live before you moved to Nevada City?
I've kind of lived in all corners of the Bay Area.
Okay.
So right before I moved here, I was living in Berkeley, which is in the East Bay. And then in 2019, I'd actually been thinking about this for a while as an astrologer. I saw 2020 coming. I saw that Jupiter, Saturn, Pluto stellium squaring Uranus and thought, I don't know if I want to live in a crowded urban area when that hits. I don't know what it'll be. I didn't think it would be a pandemic. I thought something
So
more.
you didn't read Barbour who prophesied the pandemic for 2020?
I didn't read that. No,
Okay. Okay.
I heard about that afterwards. But I
Okay.
thought, okay, maybe it's World War III. I don't know. But I felt like I want to be in a less populous area. I'd like to be in nature. And so when in 2019 I moved up here and
Alone?
um,
Alone?
no, I was in my previous marriage at the time, and so we moved up here together.
Oh, you both moved up there? Okay.
We both moved up here. We had friends who were up here, so that was part of the impulse. Probably the biggest reason, though, is the nature up here is beautiful.
Well, the two videos I recommend for the viewers on the special site about Nevada City. But there is a special aspect to it. It's a tourist town. It's like in
Becoming
Hel
more so.
it's like in Helgoland. This is an island, a tourist island in Germany, and at 10 o'clock in the morning, the island is flooded with people, and then at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, they ship away again. How about your town? Is it flooded as much as that?
It's been we've been getting more and more people. People are finding out about Nevada City. I think there's a lot more, as you've come across videos, posts. Oh,
Yeah,
you got to
yeah.
see this cute little town, people writing it up. Um, so we have a lot of events that happen here, street fairs and arts festivals, and at Christmas time we have a Victorian Christmas. That is so crowded the last couple years. And then yeah, and then they leave and there's 3,000 of us who live in the town permanently or outside of it. We live just north of the town.
Okay.
Um,
So you don't live in the high street where all the tourist restaurants and boutiques are.
no,
Okay.
we live in the woods.
Now we come to another part of your life. In 2016, this happened. Can you elaborate
Yep.
what this is?
Yes, that is Archai, the Journal of Archetypal Cosmology. It was originally founded by Kieran LeGrice, who teaches at Pacifica, as we were just talking about. And he was the primary founder, but it was really coming out of a collective called ARC, the Archetypal Research Collective. So I think the idea for it came forward in 2007. First issue came out in 2009. That whole first issue is available for free on our website,
This
archive.org.
would be this copy in
Yep.
print, and this is available for free on the online. Okay.
Yep. The first one's available for free online. And then all the subsequent issues, there are at least 2 articles available for free, and then they can be purchased. And so I was asked in 2015 by Kieran to please come on as a new editor.
Was he
And
was he at that time still in CIIS or was he already in Pacifica?
he was already in Pacifica. Yeah.
He was in CIIS because in one video you talk about that he approved a paper of yours in of 2012, which you put in one of the archive journals. So when did he leave CIIS?
He
2012?
he was a doctoral student at CIIS.
Ah, okay.
I don't remember when he graduated. I actually think it was before my time there. So maybe 2010 at the latest.
Okay. And he went
Yeah.
back to Great Britain, I believe.
He did. He's kind of been back and forth. So he's gone back to Great Britain. He actually we were neighbors in Berkeley for a while.
Okay.
Then he was living down, I think more like Ojai, closer to Pacifica. So he's been all over. I actually don't know where he is right now.
Okay.
Um, so he asked me and another person who'd already been working on the journal, Grant Maxwell, to
Yes.
come on as the two new editors. Um, and so we put together this issue, which was our inaugural issue, um, which we decided, for our first issue, let's have something that feels really grounded, really solid. And so we focused the issue on the archetype of Saturn. And we were able to reprint James Hillman's beautiful essay on Senex consciousness. And then we got contributions from different scholars and practitioners in the field of archetypal astrology, each writing about Saturn or about um, some kind of very foundational concept to archetypal cosmology. Um,
Okay.
so, yeah.
Now going back to the situation that he asked you in 2015, that was in the middle of your work on Tolkien and C.G. Jung read books. Why didn't you say no?
It was a beautiful opportunity, and
Did you
I was
know
very
how much
excited.
did you know how much work is involved with that?
No, no idea. Um, and we had a lot of energy behind that first issue, and for the most part, it unfolded really smoothly. It was a huge amount of work. I think I dropped some other projects that year. I always take on too much. This is something that I'm continuing to learn about myself.
Okay.
Um, and so when it came to the next issue, issue 6. I worked on a lot of that with Grant Maxwell, but then we decided, he would be the sole editor of that one, and then I would come in and be the sole editor of issue 7.
That is
So,
this one, yeah.
and that's that one, yes.
And in this one is the Tony Wolff essay. And
Mhm.
now the next issue is his part. This journal has the same problem which other journals in the astrological community have. For example, there was a journal of traditional astrology by Helena Avila and Luis Ribeiro in Portugal. And then there was a journal by Deborah Holding and all that. Journals like this are difficult to continue. How do you see the situation? In the first edition,
Mhm.
I can read to the viewers who was actively on the advisory board: Christopher Bach, Anna Baring, Nick Campion, this is Lampeter, then Countess Angelica Cowder, Kathy Coleman, George Farrer, we talk about Farrer in a minute, Liz Green, the famous Miss Green, Stanislav Grof, we talk about Stan Grof in the next month, the two of us, Robert Hand, Susie Harvey, Will Keeping, Sean Kelly, David Lorimer, Robert McDermott, Ralph Metzner, Jody Piggum, Daryl Rutkin, and then Claude Weiss. Did Claude Weiss ever contribute to the Archive Journal?
Not that I'm aware of.
Neither,
So,
neither am I.
yeah.
But then something changed because in the first edition, which is this one by in your editorship, the advisory board doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, the advisory board really shrunk down after a number of years, and I think that probably had already taken place before I came on.
Yes.
And so it was much smaller. I think it was just Rick Tarnas and Kieran LeGrice were the editorial advisors who we were running everything by.
How do you see
Um,
that? How do you see that problem that in the starting point there were 70 researchers, enthusiastic people in this community, and you are confronted with the situation that you are one editor for one issue and Grant Maxwell for another one, and now the distance is 2 years, I believe, for each issue. Might it be a good idea to end the project?
Well, this isn't an official announcement because this is still mid talks, but I think that we are at the point where it makes sense to sunset the project. There was so much energy there at the beginning. It
Yes,
went
yes.
into those initial issues. I think the reason that steam does run out with projects like this is it's an unpaid position. Uh, and it's very specialized too. So, it doesn't really bring in much of anything. Um,
Well,
and
I see the problem in the title. The first edition, the first issue is called The Birth of a New Discipline, Archai, the Journal of Archetypal Cosmology. And in each issue, there is a lot of theoretical, foundational essays on what is archetypal cosmology, and there is a practical application part in each issue. And archetypal cosmology is the next subject of our talk now, because I want to dive deep into that problem of the new discipline. I start on page 5. I will use now this first issue.
sure.
It's called Basic Postulates of Archetypal Cosmology. The emergence of archetypal cosmology, a new academic discipline that is developed by a group of scholars. And now, archetypal cosmology, which explores the correlation between discernible archetypal patterns in human experience and the structural order within the solar system, and then it draws on the methodology and so on and so on. This is very basic
Mhm.
and very fundamental. And now I want to go very deep in the problem of astrology as such and archetypal cosmology. One of my YouTube channels is called Archetypische Kosmologie, which is the German translation of archetypal cosmology. There's a channel of myself with that title where I did interviews with astrologers.
Mm.
When you do astrology, you have a lot of people who talk about archetypes. And in this paper of Kieran LeGrace, each of the planetary bodies, as well as the sun and the moon, is associated with a distinct archetypal principle. I'm a Neoplatonist guy.
Hmm.
I don't believe in Georges Ferrar's approach. You do, I don't. We might talk about it if you like. So I am Neoplatonist, and astrology is part of the Neoplatonism of Plotinus, Porphyrius, and Proclus, and Iamblichus. And when we talked about the active imagination,
Hmm.
some people say it's theurgy, it's magic, like in the sense of Iamblichus. Now,
Yeah.
if you look at what astrologers do, they look at Saturn, at the transit of Saturn, or in my case, actually, Uranus is in the beginning part of Gemini, which is opposite my ascendant, and all that. And then we talk a lot of astrology, chitter talk. But nobody, in my knowledge, really talks about what are they talking about.
Mm.
Because Saturn or Uranus are material objects in space.
Yeah.
And then we do something which is never explained, and it's not explained in Kieran LeCroix's Archetypal Cosmology paper. What is happening there when we do that? Saturn does nothing.
Mm.
So we have something behind Saturn or behind Uranus. And
Yeah.
you, for example, you did a talk about Uranus and Jupiter and Uranus, a very nice talk. And the interesting thing was when you were talking about Uranus, you said things about him which was typical Mercury in the tradition. It's
Hmm.
equal in the Renaissance, where there was no Uranus, the same
Yep.
talk would have been about Mercury.
Yep.
So there is a problem for me. What do astrologers, myself included, yourself included, what do we mean when we talk about planets? They do
Hmm.
nothing. They are signs for something behind there is something happening there. There's an ensouled cosmos like Anima Mundi. What
Hmm.
is that?
Hmm.
There is news. What is that? Do you have a personal astrological theory and cosmology? Do you have a religious system or a philosophical system? What is the astrological theory of Becca Tarnas? What do
Mm.
you think? What happens when we do astrology? It
Yeah.
works, like in the homeopathy, it works, and nobody talks about paragraph 6 of the organ where they talk about the spiritual force. It's typical for the medicine of homeopathy that nobody in homeopathy talks about the spiritual force in paragraph 6. They don't want to, like they don't want to talk about Tony Wolff, same problem. They deny it.
Yeah.
And the same is sort of happening in astrology.
Hmm.
All these astrologers in all these conferences talk about, well, Saturn and the transit of Uranus, and then we have Saturn in Aries, and we have Pluto in Aquarius, and they have a sextile and we have a trine to Uranus, and this does this and this is no, it doesn't do anything. They don't do anything.
Yeah.
Who does something there? Who is operating behind the curtain, behind the veil? Or would you think, sometimes I think, if we are talking about archetypes and archetypal cosmology, it might be a good idea to stay on the agnostic side. I will never know what archetypes are. All I can try to do when I do delineation of horoscopes and transits and progressions and all that, but it's beyond my level.
Mm.
In the Christian religion, we have this hierarchy, this ladder hierarchy: angels, archangels, and archai, which is lords. By the way, why did you name your journal Archai? Do you mean that level, the Archai of the beyond, above the archangels, or is that something they didn't think about?
I don't think they were using it in that sense. They were using it in the sense of just the original Greek term meaning first principle. That is the root for the word archetype.
Yeah, and that's the,
Yeah,
the, the root for the Christian ladder of the angels,
exactly.
going up to the seraphims. Now back to my question.
Yeah.
What do you think? What is
Mm.
happening there when you do? Geoffrey Cornelius calls it the moment of astrology, which is a divinatory moment,
Hmm.
which is not replicable, which is special, and it has to do with the divine. And then Geoffrey Cornelius leaves you alone because he doesn't really explain what divine means. Do,
Yeah.
do, do you know what divine means in that context?
Well, I wouldn't want to go so far. I like what you're saying about having a certain agnosticism about it or an epistemological humility. But I would say I have a curious agnosticism that wants to know more and wants to be in relationship with what it is we're describing. I don't think archetypes can ever be fully captured in language, like we were speaking before
Yeah, okay.
regarding mystical experience.
Yes.
But again, it's the very effort put in trying is an important part of it. I completely agree with you that the physical planets themselves are not, causing the correlations we see. And when I do go to bigger astrology conferences where there's many different types of astrology represented, there's this question of, well, why does it work? Why do planets in signs work, or planets in houses, or planets in aspect, or why does zodiacal releasing work, or
Yes. Yeah.
all of these different techniques? Why does the sidereal zodiac work just as well as the tropical? Why do all these different house systems work?
Well, I use whole sign houses. You use Placidus, for example.
I actually I do prefer whole sign, but
Oh,
I
you do?
teach
Oh, you
using
do?
Placidus. I do.
Okay.
Uh,
Why are you on my side? Because most people are on Placidus side. Why are you on my side, whole sign houses?
Because several years ago, I did become quite interested in the techniques of Hellenistic astrology.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't able to learn as much as I would someday like to. This is just kind of the nature of life and research and things taking over. Stan Groff, who we'll talk about next time, has kind of taken over my research uh, field. And so I had to set going deeper into Hellenistic astrology aside. But when I compared the techniques with whole sign houses compared to Placidus, I found that there was a lot that really stood out to me, so that I found it quite interesting. The reason I teach with Placidus isn't actually so much because of Placidus, but because if you're teaching new students about planetary aspects and you're not putting a lot of emphasis on houses or signs, Placidus really easily shows, well, there's the horizon line, there's the midheaven I see.
Yeah, yeah.
That's why I do it. Um, I would love to see some kind of synthesis between the two. I have a late ascendant degree, so my chart gets kind of tilted sideways in whole sign. Like I like that cosmological image that you get with Placidus. So why is it they all work? And I think the key is kind of in the name, astrologos, the language of the stars. These are all languages. And there's a number of astrologers who have said, you wouldn't say that the word for tree in English or German or Spanish or Japanese, one is more correct than the other, even though they're all different. They're ways of describing something, as you were saying, that is going on behind these systems. Whether it's the literal physical planetary positions or these more human constructed systems that we've overlaid onto the sky, such as divisions of the houses or how we divide up the zodiac and so forth. And it is pointing towards something, which is this deep archetypal patterning of the cosmos itself that speaks to us in these astrological languages. And so, in terms of, well, what is an archetype? Um, I think first and foremost, I would say it is a primordial principle with agency that expresses itself through the world, and we can encounter it at many different levels. Um, And what I mean by that is, I think that they're probably you're speaking of being a Neoplatonist, that they are the multiplicity that refracts from the unified divinity. And in their most kind of transcendent primordial form, maybe we can't even begin to put language to them or to describe them. But we can encounter them at different levels. We can encounter them in the form of the planetary archetypes. We can encounter them in the form of, psychological figures, for example. We can encounter them in the form of the deities of all the world's religions or mythological pantheons. Um, those are all kind of different levels that these archetypal principles express themselves through to make them more accessible to human consciousness. Um,
That was a philosophical answer. But you have a personal experience, which you mentioned in Adam Allenbass's talk.
mhm.
You participated in the research of your father and Stan Grof, and you took shamanic drugs, something like that, peyote or other drugs, and you had special experiences and you met them. Can you
Mhm.
elaborate on that?
Yes. This was, it's quite long ago at this point. So it was an experience with LSD, and I did have this experience of um, feeling that the planetary archetypes they express themselves through that lens at this time in my life, um, that they introduce themselves to me, and that it was like this shift from being on one side of the veil to the other, where I could suddenly see, experience, encounter, be fully immersed in who each of these archetypes were. And that it was from that point forward that I could perceive archetypes in the world and in astrology. So it was like as sudden a shift as when, you can't read, but you see words on a page, to when you learn how to read and suddenly your eye lands on written letters and you immediately read what it says. Um, and so it was that kind of shift in consciousness for me, from I was learning the techniques of astrology to oh, I can see archetypes in the world. I can see these universal principles. And having a deep intuitive knowing that of who they were. And so just to finish that, I say that very intentionally when I say who they were, that there is this profound sense of beingness, of personhood, um, to these archetypal principles. And they, while I encountered them in those planetary forms, which I think was exactly what I needed at that time, but also for my life and career as it's unfolded, the feeling or the intuition is that um, they go even beyond that into more kind of transcendent forms that they're not confinable to any one structure or system. Anyway, sorry, please go ahead.
But you are not going as far as I am going to consider the fact that archetypes are entities, real entities, and you can meet them as entity. And sometimes human beings in a group can get together. For example, when I was with the Rosicrucian Order, we were 700 people and we had conferences on the weekend. Then there was a spiritual energy field, and they're manifested in an egregor. It's a spiritual technology. The egregor is a stage of something created, and when this continues, this egregor could become an archetype and become his own life. And as
Mm-hmm.
long as people support the energy of the archetype is a working unit.
Yeah.
This is very Neoplatonic. And now I come to your project. You were in one of the videos with a YouTuber of England, Angela Foss, and around them. You were talking about your project of astrological magic, and you were talking about things which are very close to what I was just saying. How
Yeah.
far is your project with astrological magic? How far did it develop?
Um, it always was more of a personal project, and it's not something that I've necessarily taken further in a scholarly form. I am giving a version of that talk that you just referenced later this month, so on July 19th. Um, and it's something that's fascinated me for the last several years. And I was introduced to the field by two astrologers, Caitlin and Austin Coppock,
Okay.
and they have they've gone very deeply into astrological magic, writing about it. They're practitioners of it. They've delved into the Picatrix, for example. It's something that I really haven't, again, Stan Groff took over my life the last 4 years, that I haven't been able to explore as deeply as I someday plan to. But essentially, you're saying that I don't agree with what you're describing, but I actually do,
Okay.
in
Okay.
terms of recognizing the personhood of archetypes, and also this is what has come up in some of those um, talks that we've mentioned about the participatory imagination, this kind of co-creation between the human being, whether it's an individual human being or a group working together, of enacting or calling forth these principles into forms and symbols that we can maybe more easily relate to them. Um, and so I find this absolutely fascinating, that connection between the immanent world, the material world, and how we can commune more directly with. Um, I'm still going to kind of use a philosophical term with these principles, but ultimately, maybe especially in my private life, I often do refer to them as gods,
Yeah.
and that's how I've experienced them.
That's the way I did
Yeah.
consultation with clients, not for money. I was talking about you have to give something to Neptune because
Mhm.
he wants your sacrifice. Now going back to Stan Grof, we will talk about a lot of about Stan Grof in August. Richard Harness, your father, and Stan Grof, they were doing researching with this LSD and other drugs, what people can experience through these sessions. And then they found out that if you look at the transits, they can prognosticate what they will experience.
Mhm.
And I was curious, why didn't they include secondary progressions in that research? Why only the transits?
They,
Doesn't make sense to me. If you want to say you will experience when you take the drug this and this and this in the astrological craft basket, we have transits and we have progressions and even other techniques to prognosticate. And the
yep.
progressions are very, very often very precise in telling you what will happen on that day, because then the secondary moon is such and such, and the ascendant is there and there. Do you know why they restricted themselves to transits
So Rick does use secondary progressions
for this
in his own
research?
in his own work, and he'll actually often be like, "Oh, do you know you have this going on in your secondary progressions?"
Oh, okay.
Um, and it's shockingly accurate. I mean,
Yes,
some
it
of the
is.
things
Yeah.
I've figured out regarding, like the exact conception time of my second child lines up with the exact, I think it's the exact progressed full moon, my most recent one, like down to the minute. And so he does look at them. I think the reason that his published work has focused primarily on what he calls the three forms of correspondence. So natal charts, world transits, and personal transits is simply the simplicity to speak to a more general
Yeah,
audience
okay, I
because
understand that. Yeah, okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
because progression's just it's another technique. It's another layer of complexity, but he absolutely uses them in his own work and research and so forth.
So can we come to this book, The Participatory Turn, Essays on Spirituality, Mysticism, Religious Studies, 2008, and it's edited by George, I can't pronounce it, George
Jorge Ferrer, yes.
Jorge Ferrer, and your chair of your dissertation, Professor Sherman.
Hmm.
Can you elaborate what this is about?
Yeah.
I believe you are on their side, whereas I'm not. To make this clear, I don't follow Ferrer on his approach to transpersonal psychology, revisited, typically Neoplatonic. Okay. Uh,
Sure.
how about this book? Can you tell about this turn? This he has a the first book of him was of 2002 when he was revisiting transpersonal psychology, I believe.
Revisioning, yeah,
Yeah.
revisioning transpersonal theory.
What's this about, and why do you follow that path, which I really hate it. I hate this thing.
Well, I would say that, and actually to get the best understanding of my view on it, where I did try and bring the way Jorge talks about um, participatory theory in relation to archetypal astrology.
Yes.
I have an essay in that issue 5 that you were showing called Iridescent Infinity, and it can be found on my website, beccatarnas.com, if anyone wants to read it, where I don't fully agree with him
Oh, good,
as far
because
as he goes.
I was hoping you would say that.
There's a lot that I agree with, and I think the reason that I embraced it so thoroughly when I encountered his work was it gave me a wonderful kind of epistemological shock where I had to revise my own view because I just had this experience that I described of encountering the planetary archetypes. And then I had come across someone who says, you may have an experience that feels objectively true, but that doesn't mean it's objectively true for everybody. I was
And
like,
that is what I hate. Exactly
um,
that. Because in my Neoplatonic view, you are you are risking a lot if you talk like that, because the gods don't like being talked like that about.
I can understand that perspective to be sure. And I think that what's valuable in this perspective is it affirms the experiences of people from multiple religious backgrounds, multiple um, cultural backgrounds, vastly different types of mystical experience, where the risk that we can fall into, and certain people do, is kind of creating a hierarchy of saying, well, my experience is more
Yeah,
true than
okay.
yours.
This in this aspect, I follow you. I don't want to do that. It's more I have my Platonic view,
Hmm.
and people in Asia have their view, and they are both valid. I agree on that.
Yeah.
but Pharaoh has a tendency to drift away in, it's not materialistic, but it's close.
Where I think it can, where I think the risk is that you're describing is that it can become a little too heavy on the human agency side.
Yes, that's exactly what I mean. Yeah. Yeah.
And because he's so unwilling to give any attributes
Right.
to the
Right.
divine mystery, as he calls it. Um, so where I find it valuable is what I laid out, that a participatory, um, what my husband in his recent dissertation called a participatory cosmology allows us is an affirmation of that diversity of experiences, of religions, of mystical traditions, and so forth. Um, and what the argument that I've put forward in that essay is I think that there is a deep patterning here, um, that there is a structure to the divine, that there's this paradox of the one and the many that is present. Um, and we can't ever fully take ourselves out of the equation. But that doesn't mean we're the only part of the equation. That's the tension that I want to hold.
No, okay.
And back to the beginning of our conversation where we're talking about um, imaginal experience. I think it's applicable there too, where we can't take ourselves out of the equation, but so we're not just kind of ripping the curtain back on the collective unconscious and saying, ah, now I see it
Yeah.
as it
Yeah. Yeah.
truly is.
Yeah. Okay.
We're still there, but we're engaging with something that is very real and has its own agency and deserves, respect and so forth. So my understanding of participation is holding that tension simultaneously, recognizing the agency of both the gods and our relationship to them. And the way that I'll describe this quite simply to students is um, we see that in the outer world too, that I'm a different person when I relate to my husband or when I relate to a close friend or when I relate to my mother or a stranger. It pulls forward different facets of me. Of course it does. So we're always in a participatory relationship with other people. And if we can recognize it at that level, I think it makes sense when we're talking about at the divine level. Of course, we're going to pull different things out of the divine. Of course, the divine will show up a little differently for each of us. Um, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something true that we're encountering. Um, yeah.
Recently, I was talking with Gary Philipson. His book, The Year Zero, was republished by Sophia Press in Lampeter. And he has a dissertation, Astrology and Truth. And in this dissertation, he talks about William James. And you are very much involved with Whitehead.
Uh, I, I should put a caveat there that I've tried to be. And I'm very close to friends, colleagues who are deeply interested in Whitehead, but I've never fully grasped Whitehead. So let me just
Well,
say that.
I myself have discarded Whitehead completely in my
Okay.
philosophy. I have the advantage. I have a full philosophy of up to Proclus and Jamblichus, so I can easily discard new philosophers if I don't like them.
Sure.
How about William James? Did you ever read William James?
I'm ashamed to say that I haven't done a deep dive into William
No,
James at
no,
this
it's
point.
quite okay.
Um,
Back to your husband. You talked about his dissertation. That is your present husband with the
yes.
dissertation. And so talk about your husband. What is he doing? Why did he do a dissertation? In what subject? And what is your husband? Is he at home and watching the children, or is he in a profession or something like that?
Yeah, so we met back in 2012. We were students together in the PCC program. His name's Maximilian Diarman. And so we were friends for about 8 years before our relationship started. And so we were students together, and then he took a long break. He started his PhD, and then he took a 7 year break because he was one of the producers and directors of the film series Changing of the Gods, which is
Oh,
based in
okay.
part on
Yeah, okay.
Cosmos and Psyche. Yeah.
Yeah. A series which is not available for me to look at, even if I would be willing to pay for it. It's not available in
Well,
Germany.
Well, we'll see what we can do for you. I can't say the same for your audience, but we'll see what we can do for you.
But let me ask you this.
Yeah.
I'm a very normal person. I know that your father invested a lot of engagement, motivation to produce these 10 series, this is episodes, 10 episodes of Changing of the God, something like that.
Hmm.
And the marketing strategy, it's neither on Amazon Prime, it's not on Netflix, and it's not to buy in a European approachable category. If you buy it in America, you pay 50 euros for postage. You know, that's, you cannot forget
Right.
about that.
Yeah.
So why is this important series, Changing of the Gods, handled so unbelievable, unprofessional in the marketing space?
That is a question that I cannot answer, and I don't think Rick would be able to answer either, or my husband for that matter.
Okay.
Yeah,
It's just
it's out
that's
of our hands,
it's
put
out
it
of it.
that way.
Okay, back
Yeah.
to your husband. And what was the title of his dissertation?
The title of his dissertation is The Cosmological Self, and then the subtitle is Towards a Planetary Consciousness.
So he was dissertating on the subject we were talking today.
Yes, he was one of those people who took on such a vast topic and somehow brought it all together. And he just graduated last month, or about a month and a half ago. So this has been very present in our lives with him finishing his dissertation. I think his defense is up on YouTube or soon will be. It's a beautiful defense, and he's basically putting forward drawing on many different fields, um, evidence for uh, our self-identity being cosmological. So we're not identified, first and foremost with our ethnicity or our nation or our political affiliation or even being human beings or, even just earthlings, but this cosmological identity. And he demonstrates that from multiple perspectives, the biological, from the depth psychological, and so forth. He brings in a little bit of archetypal astrology, but just enough to support the depth psychological. He went very deeply into William James, so I was able to get a kind of secondary education on James and early psychology from him. And so he's wanting to publish the dissertation as a book. He's just finished, so he's looking into doing that, and he's really in a pivot at the moment in terms of
Why
his work.
why is he looking into it? Why didn't he do it yet? Because Benjamin Dykes is famous for his books on history of astrology, it's like 15 something like books on Amazon. I have published books by Book on Demand knowledge that you have in California, I'm sure, book on demand availabilities, and it takes you 50 minutes to publish a thing instead of waiting for a publisher to accept the changes he wants to change. And all these publishing problems with the publishers who want to influence your work.
Yeah.
Why is your husband, as you are, interested in a normal academic publisher instead of just publishing it right away?
It's a great question. It's one we have every few days. And, it depends on the project. There's some projects that we're working on that we feel, we could do in that much more accessible form, publishing it ourselves, kind of creating our own press.
It costs nothing. It costs 25 euros.
Right. No, it's wonderful. He wants an academic press because of the
Okay, okay,
legitimacy
okay.
that it provides. I have the same problem with
Yeah,
my dissertation.
yeah.
Um,
So he wants to
yeah.
become an assistant professor as well.
He does not.
Oh, he does not?
He is creating his own work, which I won't share more on just because it's still in process.
Okay, okay,
Um, but he was in production for so many years. He worked as a music producer in New York. He's produced some documentary films. His first was called The
okay,
Future of Energy, which you should be able to find on Amazon.
okay.
Um, and but now he's really moving out of production.
So I
But
have to
it's a
wait
recent
another 10
pivot.
years till his dissertation is published in an academic publisher like
Oh no, he's much faster than me.
you're sure about that?
I'm sure about that. My guess
Okay.
would be it'll be out in 2 years. The only thing that's hung up mine is I have all these images in it.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes.
So I have to find a publisher who's willing to go along with me in printing those, hopefully in color, and getting the permission from the Jung estate and the Tolkien estate, which is very, very hard to get. And that's why it's
Oh,
been 8 years.
oh, okay. Very good.
Otherwise, I would have had it out years ago.
And you have paintings. And
I do.
and to find your paintings, the people have to go to your homepage. Here is the Nevada City thing. And if you go to the homepage of Professor Tarnas, there is paintings. And my question is, do you sell them?
I don't. Just because I've never set up the infrastructure to do that. And also, I think the most recent painting up there I did back in maybe 2014.
I don't care. You could sell it for, you could say $10,000. You could put price tags on it, let's say $50,000, and then wait if somebody wants to buy it.
I could do that. I have a lot of little creative things that I've done in my life where uh I have not sought out the path to monetize them. And that's,
Oh, that's okay.
probably
Is it
probably my own flaws.
I have the feeling it's watercolor, is that correct?
Yep. They're mostly watercolor. That's kind of been my favorite medium. My, I went to a Waldorf school. We did a lot of watercolor there,
Yeah,
and my
yeah.
my aunt is also a watercolor artist, and so she was one of my
What do you think of my
influences.
painting? This is called Galadriel.
Oh, that's beautiful. It's very
Galadriel Galadriel is
immersive.
here, Celebron is here. This is not by me. This
Oh,
was done. I did a sort of painting course in oil, and I couldn't do Celebron, so my teacher painted this, but the rest is
mm,
myself. And
beautiful.
this is sort of active imagination, if you want to
Yeah.
look at it.
Mm,
So, did I
lovely.
forget to ask something important?
I think we've covered a very wide range of territory, and I'm just honestly I'm so amazed and impressed at the amount of research that you've done over the years, and honored too. So just thank you. First of all, I don't know how many people know my work as deeply as you do. In some
Well,
ways, I feel like you might know it better than I do at this point.
well, if you watch Becca Tarnas in all her videos, you get to know her. And I think the first video of yourself I was watching in 2017, so I have a long history of watching your videos. Okay, so I thank for the viewers who were with us till now, and thank you by myself. Many thanks to you that you took the time. Well, we have another session next month about your work on the biography of Stanislav Grof, which is a very important work, and
Mm,
his research is important for the world. So for now, thank you.
thank you
Have
as
a
well.
nice time in Nevada City, and I stop the recording.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Okay.